So now your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. Oh my God, I'm more of the creator of my life and the less of the victim I am of my life.
I think we're in an age of information, and in an age of information, ignorance is a choice.
And the moment I started noticing changes in my body, what was going on outside of me, I started correlating at what I was doing inside of me. Now I was just hooked.
If you want to change your life, you need to start by being in control of your thoughts. And in this video, Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches you the secret to controlling your mind.
I just feel like people are still in a lot of pain and trauma and overwhelm, especially if you consume the media and the news. Please stop and minimize that, because I think it only creates more stress. When people say this is going to be the worst week of any week and it's going to be more deaths, like, what can people do in a simple, practical step when they just feel like, man, there's so much in my head right now. What can I do to start to slow down my heart rate just a little bit, to start thinking more calmly and make better decisions?
Yeah, I think that the moment we switch on that system for alert or for emergency, we alter ourselves in some way. And all of that response that we have to an environment that we perceive as threatening or dangerous pretty much causes us to move out of balance. And when you're out of balance, you're in survival. And when you're in survival, you want to rush to get things done. You can't be present. You believe everything that equal to the feeling of fear or hostility, because information is relevant to you in that emotional state. So teaching people then that they have some type of control over that sympathetic response, that emergency system that switches on, is preparing you for something you can't predict.
Yeah.
Something that's an unknown, something that you can't control. And that survival system causes us to move more into our animal nature. And we're tapping our body's vital resources for health and regeneration. So short term, it's great, but you keep doing it over and over again, you start becoming more and more conditioned to that rush of energy. So teaching people how to self-regulate, teaching them how to move back into the present moment, teaching them that they can shorten their responses. It's really not that you react. I mean, we all react. The question is, how long are you going to react for? Because if you keep that reaction going, then you can't perceive any change in your environment. You won't have any ability to heal. So you become more affected by your environment. So simple process of getting back into the present moment, self-regulating, trading that fear for some other emotions.
Yeah.
And that's doing the work and
Right.
the practice. And that's what we should be doing, because now we have energy to heal. We have energy for growth and repair. We have energy to create now. And we're not losing energy now. We're gaining energy. And
Yeah.
that signals the immune system, as we talked about. And that's what causes T cells to make antibodies and antigen, the immunoglobulins that fight antigens. And now your internal defense system can take care of the micro world,
Yes.
where there are invaders, where there are attackers, and you have energy to heal. And your immune system, as we said, is always combating viruses and bacteria. And if you're less responsive to your environment emotionally, then you're less responsive to your environment physically, and you have more energy. And people just need to know the information, because that empowers them to begin to make different choices. And now that you know, you can apply knowledge and make a different choice, demonstrate a different behavior, create a new experience, and that new experience creates a new emotion. Wow, then all of a sudden now you start learning new things, and you start stepping away from your old self. And that's what you want people to do. Biology changes.
What does gratitude do for us in replacing that kind of anxiety and fear?
Well, I mean, we've done research on gratitude, and it's very interesting, because when you receive something, you've just received something. When something's happening to you, or something just happened to you that's favorable, you feel this feeling of gratitude. So
Yes.
the emotional signature, its signature emotionally means something just happened to you or something is happening to you. So your body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between an experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. To the body, it's so objective, it's exactly the same. So when people start to feel gratitude, their body is believing that something favorable is going to happen to them, that is happening to them, or has already happened to them.
Really?
So the emotional signature of gratitude is the perfect signature or the state of energy to receive. So when we begin to embrace our future and we feel gratitude for it, we will believe that future is more of a reality because it's equal to the emotion that we're experiencing, but we're feeling the emotion before the actual event occurs. So gratitude, in a sense, you could use it to elevate your energy. And when you do, just 10, 15 minutes a day, you'll strengthen your immune system by 50%. That's
wow.
research
Just by having
done.
gratitude for 10, 15 minutes.
Just because your body starts to put energy right in your heart center. And there's a gland in there that we talked about in your show called that gland that has an endocrinological aspect and an immunological aspect. And it begins to signal chemicals that tells your T cells, strengthen. You got energy to like modify and create more receptors for anything coming out. And now your inner environment is doing that, and your T cells make these antibodies, these immunoglobulins that are the body's natural flu shot. It's proteins that protect cells, especially immune cells. And now you have an internal army, an internal order that will be greater than the environment. And now you have strength, you know, and you, from a suggestibility standpoint, you only accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts equal to your emotional state. So if people are in fear, then the information that comes in equal to fear, they will begin to resonate with or relate with because it's equal to that emotion. So they'll accept the information, they'll believe the information, they'll surrender to the information without ever analyzing it. And that programs us into certain limited behaviors. So then when you feel gratitude, the thoughts that you think, the dreams that you create, the behaviors that you demonstrate.
Preach it.
You begin to feel the future. Now something else happens. You start creating a huge change in the information, and you program your autonomic nervous system to program your body to become that future. And people are doing it.
I went back to school and studied neuroscience because mind was such a strong element. It wasn't diet, it wasn't celibacy, it wasn't any of those things. It was just really this element. And so then I was able to figure out that there were 4 common things. And then I wrote a book about it, and then I thought, God, if this works really on people that were sick and are better, and they come from all walks of life, all colors, all races, all genders, sexual preferences, but all of a sudden, I wanted to see if I was able to reproduce it. So then I started seeing, okay, let's see if we can teach this, be able to reproduce the outcome, because that's science, right? So I went through about...
What were the 4 common things?
The first one was that they all believed and accepted that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And
These people you interviewed who had had injuries that overcame them?
No, these are people with cancer, MS, lupus, Parkinson's disease.
Who got better?
Yeah, just spontaneously. It's called a spontaneous remission.
So they believed there was an intelligence.
There was some invisible life force that they were connected to, that they felt like they had lost their connection to. They became separate and disconnected from. And that when they got the diagnosis, they woke up and said, man, I got to connect again, and I got to connect to my essence. And so they developed a relationship with it, just like you develop a relationship with anybody. It takes time, you got to be present, you got to connect, you got to experience, you got to be present. All of these things are important elements. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that they realized that it was the mismanagement of their emotions and the hormones of stress that really began to create their condition. Now, Now, stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. Stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. We have an innate mechanism in our body that returns us back to order. So then if someone cuts you off on the LA freeway, you have an emotional reaction, but 15 minutes later you're back to driving and you're over it, right? That's all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress.
But when it's all day long, all week, all year.
Yeah, so if you're reacting to, like if Tyrannosaurus Rex is chasing you, you have to make a decision. Am I going to use 20% of my energy or am I going to use 100%? So it turns out when you're reacting to traffic.
200%.
Oh, right, or if you're reacting to your coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you.
Right.
You're turning on that response, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive, because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because nobody can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Well, human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems, and you're producing the same biological effects. So those chemicals give the brain and body a rush of energy. And people become addicted to that rush of energy. So now they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job. They need the poor relationship. So that means they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. Right?
Why do we need the bad job or bad relationship and stay stuck in those?
Because it's a conditioned response. So listen, if you get angry at a coworker and all of a sudden you get an arousal in your brain and body, right? You get a rush of energy. When you start noticing that your body starts dropping, your brain starts noticing your energy starts dropping, you're automatically going to have the image of the coworker in order to what? Give your body the next jolt, right? So all of a sudden, people become addicted to their own thoughts, right? So these people realize that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I gotta get beyond my past. I got to get beyond these emotions. I got to make some big changes. I got to break the habit of being myself. You know, I got to stop being this person. Now, that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing, really hard. Right? Because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person, or you go to that place, or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change,
you got to change the environment.
They got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances.
Be mindful of that every time
Stay
it comes
conscious.
up. To be like, okay, I'm going to think differently.
Right.
I'm not going to react
this
way.
I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion. Which means now their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing they're living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What's the relevance behind that? Well, the latest research on genes says genes don't create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease.
The emotional environment or the physical environment?
Your environment, any environmental reaction. But if you're reacting emotionally to your environment the same way, you're signaling the same gene in the same way, and now you're headed for a genetic destiny. So the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease. If you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, your thoughts could make you sick. And if your thoughts could make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts could make you well? So they began to realize that, oh my God, the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking caused me to feel guilt, and I don't even know it's guilt, it just feels like me. It's just, I'm used to this same chemical continuity. Now, the moment they decided to change, anytime you decide to change and change anything about yourself, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable.
It's going to hurt.
You're going to leave the known.
Yeah.
You're going to leave the familiar, and you're going to step into the unknown.
Even if the familiar is uncomfortable and painful,
right.
It's still going to be painful leaving the pain.
Right, because some people are super happy being unhappy.
Right.
So then they would rather cling to their suffering than take a chance in possibility. So these people said, I really have nothing to lose, right? So then they said, I'm willing to be uncomfortable and be in the unknown. And it turns out that's the perfect place to create from. So when the body is conditioned to become the mind, then to change is to be greater than the body. right?
How
Because
do we become greater than the body?
well, that's a whole nother conversation. But let me finish this,
Yes.
okay? So the third thing they said was, okay, so now that I know that I got to break the habit of being myself and I can't mismanage my thoughts and feelings, I got to change how I act, I got to watch how I speak, I got to become conscious of how unconscious I am, because 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, like a computer program, emotional reactions, unconscious beliefs and perceptions. So the first step to change is to become conscious of how you think, to notice how you act, to pay attention to how you feel. And the act of observing those states of mind and body separates you from that program. Now you're the consciousness observing that program. And it turns out the more conscious you become of how unconscious you are, lighting a match in a dark place, that first step creates enormous amounts of chaos in the brain and body. And it's disturbing, so people just go back to the same addiction, the same emotion, the same problem. This feels better. No, that feels familiar. So they said, okay, now I got to change. I got to reinvent myself. Now this is really important because they started sitting down and thinking, okay, who in history do I admire? Who are great people, role models that I could follow? What are the qualities and characteristics that they have? How am I going to change? These are what we call frontal lobe questions. The creative center of the brain switches on and the emotional center settles down. So then they started thinking, how would I have to be in a new life if I was really going to heal? What would I have to change about myself? Now, there's this interesting phenomenon that if you close your eyes and you begin to think about doing something, you're an athlete, you understand this. If you're a background in football and you are running a pattern or you are doing something, you would rehearse it in your mind.
Yeah.
Turns out that the act of mentally rehearsing something when you're truly present, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. In fact, your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it for the last 5 days and you've never run the course. So now your brain is no longer a record of the past, because typically it is. Now it's a map to the future. So now you're priming your brain. So that became the very platform. Experiments with piano players. You take a group of people that never played the piano before. You divide them into two different categories. You take one group of people, you teach them one-handed scales and chords. You do a brain scan on them. They come and practice for 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, if you rescan the brain, they grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Nothing magical there. You learn something new. Learning's making new connections. Get some instruction. You get instruction. You get your body involved. You get your body involved, you're going to have an experience. Experience enriches the brain. Pay attention to what you're doing. You got to pay attention and repeat it. Firing and wiring. You're going to assemble new circuits. You can take the other group of people, have them come for 2 hours a day for 5 days, do a brain scan before, the brain scan after. Have them close their eyes and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they'll grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people who actually physically demonstrated the action. What does that mean? It means not only do they change their brain by thinking differently, but their brain looks like they've been playing the piano for 5 days. Now set them in front of a piano. Never played the piano before. They'll play those scales and chords because their brain is wired to play it. So now, the act of rehearsing who they're going to be, what are the qualities, and beginning to get in this creative state, began to lay down the circuits of a new personality. And a new personality is connected to a new personal reality. So the next question is, does that change the body? Take a group of men, have them do one-handed curls in their mind, and bring an emotional component like stronger, harder, more intense, 1 hour a day for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, 13.5 increase in muscle strength.
Wow.
Never lifted a weight. Now their body is changing by thought alone. So these people began to reprogram their brain and body. And all of a sudden, they began to act differently. Why? Because they installed the circuits. They began to think differently, of course. They began to feel differently. They were no longer feeling pain. They're actually liking themselves, right? So then if they're living by a different emotion, and they're feeling an elevated emotion before they're healing, before they were healed, they're not waiting for their healing to feel joy and gratitude. They're feeling gratitude and joy. Now their body's believing that it's healed because the body's feeling the emotion ahead of the experience. And if the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is emotion, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment. And what do genes do? Genes make proteins. And what are proteins responsible? The structure and function of the body. Now you're literally becoming somebody else. And now you're turning down the genes for disease and you're turning up these other genes. So I started to realize that this reinvention process is exactly what we've always done. It's just that we get complacent in certain areas of our life and we stop. Now the last thing they had in common, the fourth thing, is that when they were doing that rehearsal process, that they had long moments where they lost track of time and space. In other words, they were so involved in their inner world of imaging that when they turned the light on in the room or they lift their blindfold up or whatever they were doing, they thought it was 20 minutes later, and it was an hour and 20 minutes later. And when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention and you're in the present moment, all of a sudden, you will leave this three-dimensional reality. And when you leave this three-dimensional reality, there's only one other place you go, and that is the realm of thought, and that's called the quantum field. And that quantum field is where all possibilities exist, right? So they were connecting to a field of information that had everything to do with the first principle, which is that invisible intelligence that's both within us and all around us, personal and universal. It is the unifying field that governs everything material in this world. And if you're going to change something material, that means you got to get beyond your body to heal your body.
Right.
Because if you're your body trying to heal your body, there's one thing that we can guarantee: it's going to take time. It's going to just take a long time because you're playing by the rules of Newtonian physics. You play by the rules of quantum physics. Energy dictates matter. So when you're truly in the field and you're making changes there, then the downward cascade, neurologically, biologically, chemically, hormonally, genetically, is the side effect of what's happening in the field.
It accelerates.
It accelerates it, exactly. So you do it in less time because you're more connected to a realm that doesn't play by time.
Now we have proof and evidence and science backing all this. And how did that start to happen?
Yeah, it's a great dialogue because I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And if you rewind the tape 10 years ago, you know, information was the thing that stimulated thought, stimulated new ideas. And as we learn new things, we make new connections in our brains. So as we begin to add new stitches into that three-dimensional tapestry in our mind, we're beginning to cause our mind to function in new ways. But the key then is to apply it, to personalize it, to do something with it. And 10 years ago, when I got in front of an audience and talked about the application, nobody wanted to step outside that philosophical, theoretical, intellectual realm, right? Because doing something means you're going to have to change something about yourself.
Painful.
Yeah, you're going to get uncomfortable, right? And I think we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And because of technology, we have access to so much content. And information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. They work together. So there's an energetic change, I think, that's taking place in the world right now where people are so informed that old models, old paradigms are beginning to break down, whether it's the medical model or the religious model, the education model, journalism, the economy, politics. It's all beginning to come to the surface because something else has to come out. And I think that one of the things that people are realizing is that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to do this or a nun with 40 years of devotion. You just got to understand the formula. And just like any skill or anything you learn, you got to go from thinking to doing to being. You got to take knowledge, you create the experience, and if you keep doing it over and over again, you start getting a skill or you start getting wise about how to do it. And you know that you know how to do it. Well, in the last 10 years, we have assembled a scientific team. And let's see if you can really make significant brain changes. I don't want those changes to just be in your mind. I want them to be in your brain. I want to be able to see before and after pictures to say, that person has a significant change after a traumatic brain injury or anxiety or depression or a cyclic mood disorder or a stroke. We want to see that there's been significant change. At the same time, let's measure your brain in real time and let's look to see what that transformation process looks like. And in the discovery, Lewis, of that process, we gained so much knowledge about what that transformational process looks like. In other words, I can tell you without a doubt that if you're analyzing your life right now within some disturbing emotion, that 100% of the time you're going to make your brain worse.
If you think about your life
if you're stuck in an emotion, like you're frustrated, you're angry, you're fearful, resentful, and you're thinking within that emotional state. In other words, you can't think greater than how you feel. That means then you were thinking in the past because those emotions are a record or residue of the past. So we see people in the process of change that are analyzing in duality or polarity. That kind of drives the brain into higher states of arousal and further away from true change. So we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans, and we now know that there's a formula to create greater brain coherence, greater brain efficiency, to make your brain work better. And when your brain works better, you work better. At the same time, it requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion to begin to change your energy and to change your life. And nobody changes until they change their energy, right? So then how do you get a person out of resentment, frustration, into joy and freedom? Why would they feel grateful or joyful or free if the experience hasn't happened? So most people are spending the majority of their life waiting for something out there to take away their emptiness or pain or the resentment in here. Well, if they're waiting their whole life in separation or lack, then and we create reality, then the lack is driving certain thoughts, which is creating more separation and more lack. So teaching people then to begin to condition their body emotionally before the evidence takes place in their life is breaking a significant habit, right? Yes. So instead of living by cause and effect, now we're beginning to cause and effect. So the moment you start feeling whole and grateful, we now know your healing will begin at that moment.
Yes.
The moment you start feeling worthy and abundant, your wealth is coming. You know, you're generating a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of wealth. And so
how does someone feel worthy though if they've always been told they're not worth it?
Yeah, well, so
or that's the story they tell themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not worth it because
Yeah.
she didn't say yes when I asked her on a date.
Right.
Because he broke up with me, because I got fired, because my parents left me. How am I worth it when there's so much evidence or story around a negative thing?
Let's stop telling the story of your past and let's start telling the story of your future. And people who aren't defined by a vision of the future, for the most part, are left with memories of the past. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. So most people wake up in the morning and they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are memories that are tattooed in the brain that are associated to certain people and things at certain times and places. So the moment the person wakes up, clean slate, they start thinking about the problems they're thinking in the past. If you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, well, there's a possibility that your past is going to be your future. Every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So then the moment you start recalling the problem, you start feeling unhappy. Now your body's in the past because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So people reaffirm their identity based on the past, right? And it turns out that the redundancy of doing that, conditioning only requires an image and an emotion. And most people are unconsciously conditioning their body into the familiar past, into the known. So now if you're in the familiar past and in the known, you're going to crave the predictable future, right? That's the known as well. And there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the eternal present moment. That's the sweet spot of the generous present moment. So you gotta labor to get that person beyond the emotions that keep them tacked or anchored to the past. And yes, it takes an effort to do that, but if you keep working with the formula, you'll reach that elegant moment where there's a liberation of energy. And now your body, as the unconscious mind, the objective mind, is not believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day because you're liberating the body from that emotional state. So you ask a person, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you so resentful? The moment you ask that, their brain is going to associate that emotion to a past event.
To a memory.
To a memory. Yeah. That's because they have nothing to look forward to in their future. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, it just means to me that you're more in love with your past than you are with the future. So how do you teach people to believe in a future that they can't see or experience with their senses yet, but they've thought about enough times in their mind that their brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that's absolutely possible. We know that. And how do you teach a person to select a new possibility in their future and begin to emotionally embrace that future before it's made manifest, to such a degree that their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes in new ways ahead of the environment. Now, till their body begins to change to look like the event has already occurred. We've proven that that's possible. Now think about this.
So the more you think about your desired future, the joy, the gratitude, the feelings you want to have that are more positive, the more you think about it as a future thing happening, the more your body shifts now.
Exactly. So your body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now think about this. The stronger the emotion you feel from some condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot. And that memory now is embossed in the brain. It's branded in there. So then people think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And the stronger the betrayal, the stronger the trauma, the more the body's living in the past, right? Crazy. So how do you reverse that? So now, if you truly got passionate about a future, we've all done this. You get a wild idea in your mind and you start holding on to that vision and you're preoccupied with it. All of a sudden, the thought in your mind becomes the experience and you start feeling the energy of the future.
Yeah.
Now, the stronger the emotion you feel from that vision, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind, and now you're remembering your future.
And vice versa, the stronger you pay attention to the feeling of the past pain, you're going to create the pain in this moment.
Exactly. So it requires a coherent brain, and we now know that there's a formula for that, and we've got beautiful research to show that people can do it. They just have to practice. And it requires a coherent heart, because resentment, frustration, impatience creates a very incoherent heart.
Yeah.
And when that heart becomes incoherent, you stop trusting yourself. There's no energy there. You stop trusting in your future.
Wow.
So then, if there's physical evidence in your brain and body, physical evidence to look like the event has already occurred, it's quite possible you'll be thinking neurologically within the circuits of your future, and you'll begin to feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion of your future. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. And now your state of being is living in the future instead of the past. Now, the moment you disconnect from the emotion of your future because of traffic or some coworker or your ex or whatever people come up with, now you're back to the energy of your past. And now you're going to start looking for it, analyzing, why hasn't it happened? Well, if you're feeling the emotion of your future, why would you look for it? Because you would feel like it already happened, and that is the place where the magic happens. So then you can't just do this, get up, and then return back to your old state of being. You got to maintain that modified state of mind and body.
When life happens?
Well, let me finish.
If I punch you in the face right now, how do you maintain?
Well, of course. I mean, we all take blows in our lives, and we all react emotionally. But the question is, how long are you going to react?
Right.
So then, if you can't mediate and regulate your emotional reactions, and those emotions linger for days, that's a
years for some people.
Mood, and then months, temperament, years, personality trait. So then the person's personality is literally based on the past. But they don't know that because they're doing it over and over again, and it becomes a subconscious program. So now, if it requires a coherent brain and a coherent heart, then we have to train people how to self-regulate. So we've done thousands and thousands of measurements. We've partnered with the Heart Math Institute to teach people how to create and sustain heart coherence.
How do we do it?
Well,
besides going to your workshop, what's the simplified version? I'm sure it takes more time than...
Well, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It just requires getting still, closing your eyes, putting your attention on your heart, changing your breath so that you move into the present moment. And when you slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down. When you slow your brain waves down, now you're accessing your autonomic nervous system. So then you train a person how to open their heart and feel an elevated emotion. And it takes a little practice. And just like a flower that takes time to bloom, it takes a little bit of time. But if you work in trading the resentment, the frustration, or the impatience for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness, and you keep at it, there'll come a moment where that system switches on, and now you're feeling grateful for no reason at all. Now, that's not a bad thing, because gratitude The emotional signature of gratitude means something's happening to you. Something has happened to you.
Yeah.
You're receiving something, or you just received something. So your body then, when you're feeling gratitude, is in the perfect state of receiving. So then that means then you'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to the emotional state of gratitude. If you're living in resentment, you're living in fear, you're living in impatience, you could say, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, and with all you want, and that thought's going to stop right at the brainstem and never make its way to the body, because the body is
not feeling it, or because why?
because you're feeling resentment, and that thought that thought is not consistent with the emotion of resentment. Resentment has a different set of thoughts, right? In other words, once you start opening your heart, it begins to move into coherence. It begins to produce a measurable magnetic field up to 3 meters wide. Now that's frequency, that's energy. And all that energy, that frequency, carries information, carries an intent. So then when you're feeling gratitude and your heart is open, you're broadcasting energy into the field.
A frequency.
A frequency. You lay the intent of the thought of your health or your wealth. That frequency can carry the thought of your wealth. It can carry the thought of your health. If you're suffering, suffering does not carry, that energy does not carry the thought of your wealth. It carries a different set of thoughts. So then we're teaching people how to self-regulate, because if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated.
Right.
And you better know how to self-regulate. And you have to know the moment you disconnect from the energy of your future because of some circumstance in your life and you lose that feeling, if you're practicing it on a daily basis with your eyes closed, then the next level is to be able to open your eyes and do it right in the moment and be able to self-regulate and change the frustration from some experience in your life back to the energy of your future. Now, that requires great awareness and great effort. But if you have a community of people that are practicing this on a daily basis and they're connected to their future, because that's where their mind is, they begin to want the future more than the emotions of the past. So we've done enough measurements now, Louis, to know that we can teach people how to do that, and we have evidence that people can sustain it for 45 minutes to an hour. It's a skill now. They know that they know how to do it. So now they have brain coherence and heart coherence. Well, once the heart begins to become orderly and coherent, it acts as an amplifier and it drives energy to the brain. So now the brain is getting more energy once the heart is open, and then you're thinking a different set of thoughts. And those thoughts produce different chemicals for you to feel more of that. And here comes nitric oxide from oxytocin, and then all of a sudden your heart literally starts to swell. It literally begins to open up, and there's more energy going there, and now you're coming from a different level of mind.
Right.
Is it possible that we can build our immune system so strong and our body so strong that we would reject viruses?
Your body rejects viruses all the time. Of course. It has memorized certain viruses that you've been exposed to. It has memorized certain bacteria that you've been exposed to. And it's beaten those viruses. Not every virus wins in the body. The body has an intelligence, and it has quite a library of memories in the white blood cells. So your body is fighting viruses and bacteria all the time. There's a constant competition going on.
Really?
So our research shows that 4 days of opening your heart releases immunoglobulin A, your body's primary defense against bacteria and viruses. It's better than the flu shot. It's the body's natural flu shot. And that's the innate intelligence of the body saying, I got this. I got a lot of energy. In fact, I got a surplus of energy. In fact, I'm radiating energy, and now
too much
in my
energy.
outer world. Well, now my outer world is not controlling my inner world. My inner world now is functioning independent of what's going on in my outer world. And now,
you're manifesting. You're manifesting.
Now you got it. Now you're in a creative state.
People are coming to you. Yes.
Right, exactly. Now you're a magnet. Now you have a field, right? And you have energy to heal. And our research shows that that field around your body will actually expand. You radiate more light and information. Cells are getting new information that are causing light to be exchanged between cells and information. Now the body's getting an upgrade. So So that immunoglobulin
Wow.
A in 4 days went up 50%. So now we now know that if it's going up 50%, that then the immune system was getting a new signal. And nitric oxide then causes another chemical to activate the arteries in your heart to swell. And now, just like when energy moves into your sexual organs and it swells with blood and you have energy there, the same intensity it moves into your heart. And now the heart is activated. And what do you feel? You feel an incredible amount of
Bulletproof.
love. Yeah, and
Love.
you feel whole. And now the more whole you feel, our research shows, then the less separate you feel from the things you want in your life, because you feel like you already have them. You only want things when you're in lack, but when you feel whole, then it feels like it's already happened. And that tends to be the exact emotion that causes those synchronicities and serendipities and coincidences to happen in our life. And you say to a person, what are you doing? And they're saying, I'm not doing anything. I'm just so
loving
happy.
life. I'm being myself.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm free from the past. I'm free from my story of the past. In fact, I'm more connected to the energy of my future than I am to the energy of my past. I'm believing in my future more than I'm believing in my past. In fact, I'm more in love with my future than I am with my past. And I want to keep telling the story of the future.
I'm more in love with my future than the story of my past. But most of us tell the story of our past in a negative sense on how it's held us back. Millions of times over our life, as opposed to the story of the future of what we want to create or who we want to become.
Yeah. Listen, again, you tell that story, and the latest research on memory says that memory is creative, that in fact, 50% of that story you embellish. People make up that story. Let me tell you why they make up that story. Because they excuse themselves for the fact that they haven't been able to change since that event. They'll have to make it sound worse than it really was.
To make it harder to grow and change.
So that they can reaffirm their limited sense of their inability to change. So then that story becomes more and more of a story, and it's less of the truth, because you got to work yourself up into a state. There were lions and tigers, and there was, there were helicopters,
snowstorms, and
and everybody was firing bullets. It was worse than you could possibly imagine. And then you got to feel that emotion, right? And then you're looking, oh yeah, it must have been really bad. Now that's your identity now. That's your identity.
And so the more you hold on to that identity of the past, the harder it is to become who you want to be in the future.
Well, here's to answer the other part of your question when we started talking. How do you get that person out of their past?
Yeah.
Well, we need a week. It's not going to happen.
You mean it doesn't happen overnight?
No, I want them to come right up against their fear. I want them to come right up against their doubt. I want them to come up against the point where they're going to give up and quit. And they're going to sit there and nobody else is giving up and quitting. And they're going to go all in more, and they're going to start believing there's something on the other side of that emotion. They're going to believe that there's something past the story of their past, because they're stretching themselves out of the known. And it takes a tremendous amount of awareness, repetition, information, model building, sharing, understanding, experiencing, to finally have a person get to the point where they just let go. And when they do, the body's liberated from the past, and there's a release of energy. And we now know that there's a formula to teach people how to do that. In fact, we're getting so good at it that the first 2 days, day and a half, sometimes 1 day in certain groups of a week-long event is about retiring that past, finishing it. This is when the story ends. This is when they get over it. Now, the next 5 days, the person's ready to create a new future. And they're not going to have a problem teaching their body what it feels like to be in love with life, to feel like all their needs are met, that they're free. They are going to fall in love with it, and they are going to begin to signal new genes. They're going to begin to change their brain circuitry, their brain chemistry, their immune system, their gene expression, the telomeres. It's all going to happen. They're more of that future self, and they're headed to a future. Now, here's the deal, though. You got to be able to sustain that state when you return back to your life. That's the name of the game. You got to be able to, you got to bring the game into your life now, and no person, no circumstance, no condition in your life would cause you to feel the old way again. Because the moment you started feeling victimized, the moment you started feeling angry, you just returned to the old self. You disconnected. from the energy of your future and you're back to the energy of your past. Don't expect anything to change in your life. And if you'd say to me, well, it was because of that person, I'd say, you're back to the unconscious program of believing that your outer world is controlling your inner world. Now, the moment the person starts creating effects in their life and they start having those synchronicities and serendipities, now all of a sudden, they're going to realize what they're doing inside of them is producing an effect outside of them. And they're going to say, oh my God, I'm more of the creator of my life and the less of the victim I am of my life. And I wouldn't create getting that health condition because I'm creating everything in my life. And now they're not victims. And so it's not something you get in one bite. You know, it's something you got to stay with.
Of course. So what are a few things we can do before we come to your events? What are a few things we can do to support our inner environment on a daily basis?
Well, listen, the first thing and the most important thing for me is knowledge and information. Knowledge is really power, and knowledge and information about yourself should empower you. It should empower the self, right? So when we learn about the immune system and all that can do, and we say, oh my God, you mean not every virus gets to me? In fact, no. And the more you understand that, and the more you coax your immune system into love and into love. Like I just did this little thing on our social media where I was talking about the inner army of order and what would be the signal you would want that inner army to get. And so we created this meditation and we said, what would invincibility feel like? Signal your body and feel invincible. How would you feel if you had an uncompromising will, that you had more energy than you could possibly imagine? Show your body what it feels like, because it is that emotion of invincibility, that emotion of an uncompromising will to empower your inner world. And you have the intent of that's what it's for. Wow, get ready, because you're going to start creating a cadence and a rhythm where your body's going, whoa, what is all these new chemicals? What are all these new signals?
Right.
Hey, it's time. Hey, now all of a sudden receptor sites on the T cells go, wow, we got some new signals coming from the boss here. Let's open up all those T cell receptors. Let's go. In fact, we would love a little fight right now because we got a lot of time on our hands and we got all our receptors turned on. That would be a signal for your body. We also know that if you could just trade fear and frustration and resentment and suffering for an elevated emotion and truly open your heart again and practice doing that, you'll heal.
You'll heal.
You'll heal, because all healings happen in the heart, and we've seen some really incredible moments in the last year where people that were traumatized from childhood, that were abused sexually, physically, emotionally, that were suicidal, that had all kinds of health conditions, they came to the edge of that emotion that kept them connected to the past, and they were ready to give up in one meditation because they never had felt an emotion like this that they could remember, that it was so intense. And they thought about all the times for the last year that they never missed a day of doing a meditation, even when they didn't feel like it, or when they wanted to quit halfway through and they didn't, they went all the way. They thought about all those times that they went to that point and they went one more time.
Really?
And their words are always the same. And my heart blew wide open. And I look back at my entire past, and I don't want to change one thing in my past because it brought me to this present moment. And I can see my betrayers. I could see the people in my life that had a hand in this. And I have nothing but compassion for them, because now the person is no longer viewing that past from the same level of consciousness. They're viewing it from a place of love, of wholeness. And they see the greater good of all of it. And now their conditions, their health conditions, their endometriosis, their uterine tumors, whatever it is, literally disappears, and they have an incredible change in their brain chemistry. They're in love with life. They're off their meds. They're not suicidal. Why would they be? They're free. So it can happen in an instant when the heart is healed, and everybody gets the new signal. The body's out of the past. The body's no longer feeling the emotions of the past. And sometimes we got to come right up against that edge. That's the great moment.
It's probably not sometimes, it's probably every time.
in order to break through is to get up against that edge. So are we able to essentially heal trauma? How quickly can we heal something that's been inside of our body, inside of our mindset for decades that we've never let go of?
Yeah.
And it's a part of us. How quick are we able to do that from past trauma?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal with trauma, and it's kind of an interesting thing, because when you're traumatized, some threat or some danger or some condition in your outer world through your senses is changing how you feel in your inner world. And the quotient of change between the way you normally feel in some alarm state, when you change your internal state and move into that emergency mode, you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. And now that image is branded holographically into the brain. So then we remember experiences better because we can remember how they feel, and that memory then changes the person's biology. So they think neurologically within the circuits of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions, and how we think and feel becomes our state of being. Mm-hmm. So now the person biologically is changed, and many times it's the strong emotion that begins to select and instruct the gene that creates disease. Why?
Yeah.
Because if the environment signals the gene, and that's a truth, that's epigenetics, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, the emotion that you feel from that event is literally selecting the gene for you to begin to change. And the genes make proteins. And so the person, if it's strong enough, begins to wear their trauma, not just in their brain. Now it's in their body, because every time they think about that trauma, every time they review it, every time they keep creating the imagery, they keep firing and wiring the circuits in their brain, and they keep feeling the feeling emotionally in their body. And their body is so objective that it's believing it's living in the same past experience 50 to 100 times a day. And all you need is a stimulus and a response, an image and an emotion, a thought and a feeling, and you're conditioning the body into the past. Well, you're conditioning the brain and body into the past.
And it doesn't matter if the actual event happened to you or not, because if you have the image, what I'm hearing you say, it's still going to connect to the body. So like what's happening right now is people are consuming probably more than 50, 100 pieces of media talking about trauma in the world right now.
Right.
Is that causing more physical damage on our bodies without actually having it physically hurt us?
Well, let me finish that thought, and
yes,
then we can answer that question.
Mind-blowing.
So then you asked, is it possible then that people can heal that quickly in 1 week? Yeah, because what if they create an inner event that carries an amplitude of gratitude or joy or freedom, break through from the chains of the past, and when the body is liberated and you feel that elevated emotion, the stronger the emotion you feel from that breakthrough, the more you're going to pay attention to the image in your mind. And now you're beginning to brand new circuitry in the brain, and your body's being conditioned into a new future. And the stronger the emotion you feel, and the more you pay attention to the picture, the more you're conditioning the body over time to the future instead of the past. So now you keep knocking on that genetic door emotionally, then that emotion ultimately signals a new gene that upregulates that gene to produce better proteins. And the person then all of a sudden starts healing. And we have research to show that people can do that in 4 days, signal genes to reduce cancer cells and growth, to signal stem cells to suppress, to go to active tissues and repair them and regenerate them and suppress inflammation. We have research to show that you could change the number of brain cells you have just by doing this properly. And so now all of a sudden, a person starts changing.
In 4 days,
yeah,
you can start to reverse some of the damage you've done in your body, depending on the degree of damage, it sounds like, but in 4 days, by simply replacing the imagery, the visualization, the acknowledgement to a different emotion, an emotion of joy, gratitude, peace, perspective, acceptance. I'm assuming these things.
A vision of your future.
A vision of what you want that's positive, as opposed to a vision that is tied to a negative event of the past over and over every single moment of the day. Your body will start to heal, your immune system will start to heal, and you'll start to shift your genes.
Gene expression, absolutely.
What's the difference between gene expression and just genes?
Well, you know, you come with a lot of genes, and they're just a library of potentials. They're just a storehouse of information, of possibilities. So then you got to get the right signal, the right lock into the key that begins to select and instruct genes that cause genes to make different proteins. And you can regulate so many different genes, the same genes, you can regulate them differently. So when they upregulate, they start producing really healthy and robust proteins. And that's enzymes, that's tissue, that's structure, that's function, that's hormones. It's immunoglobulins. When they downregulate because of some alarm, when there's not a lot of energy for long-term building projects, well, then you keep doing that. Then the body starts producing cheaper proteins. It's a different signal. It's not a time for growth. And so now to answer your other question,
Yes.
then it makes sense then that if you have been if you had experience of trauma, say, for example, and it's created the feeling of fear, and your fear is that it could happen again. And you don't know this, but every time you think about that future, that possible worst case scenario, and you feel the emotion, you're conditioning your body to become the mind subconsciously of anxiety. So now, all you need now is some cue in your outer environment that says it's unsafe, that there's damage there, that you're a victim, something's bigger than you that could have an effect on you. Well, now that feeling of fear is going to cause you to think thoughts equal to it. So the person then no longer needs the environment to feel that fear. They just have to have the thought about that condition now. And now they're literally knocking their brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And the body's constantly living in emergency mode. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of resources to live in emergency mode all the time. And guess what system becomes compromised by it?
Immune system.
Your immune system. Why? Because you have two protection systems. You got a system that protects you from dangers in your outer world. That's the gas pedal. That's the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight nervous system. Danger, threat out there. Use all the energy because you gotta survive. And when you survive, you got to take care of your body. So so now that system can work really well short term. It doesn't work really well if you keep it on all the time. Because if you're mobilizing all that energy for some threat in your outer world, there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And energy leaves the brain and it leaves the heart and it moves into these lower centers because now you're tapping the body's resources because there is an emergency. But whether the emergency is real or imagined, whether your anger is valid or justified or not, that you're tapping the body's very energy to heal by doing this. And the immune system says, well, we're part of really the other nervous system. We're the brake. We're the clutch. We need to get into relaxation. We need to get back into balance again. And when we do, then we'll metabolize. Then we'll assimilate. We'll reproduce. We'll excrete properly. Mm-hmm. So now you got this kind of battle between the gas pedal and the brake. And the immune system says, hey, listen, if there's foreign agents, if there's viruses, bacteria, molds, funguses, listen, we don't have a whole lot of energy here to deal with them because we're fighting this war out there. There's no homeland security. So they shut down certain receptors in the immune system. They shut down function of those lymphocytes, those white blood cells that are your inner army of protection. And it takes a lot of energy to fight a virus and a bacteria. But if there's no energy, hey, listen, it takes energy to raise the body's temperature. Where do you think that comes from? That's part of that branch called the autonomic nervous system. And the sympathetic, the gas pedal, is part of it. And the parasympathetic is the clutch, is part of that autonomic nervous system. And it's a check and balance. But so you stay in emergency for an extended period of time. And now you're exposed to some antigen or some external substance, some foreign agent, and there's no energy to deal with it, then you are victim to your environment, because every time you react to your environment and you say that person, that circumstance is controlling the way I feel and the way I think, if something outside of you is controlling your feelings and thoughts, then it makes you a victim to your environment. So then, so you will be more victimized, or you could be more of a victim to other things in your environment. People don't understand this consciously because it's a program subconsciously. So now if you begin to strengthen your inner environment now, this is where our work comes in, because we have research to show that when you place your attention right here in your heart, this center right here, this is the beginning of our divinity. This is our center of oneness, our wholeness. This is where we begin to feel love, gratitude, compassion, kindness, care, freedom, joy. It's all these elevated emotions that are heartfelt emotions. That our research shows that when you begin to teach people how to open this center, and you teach them a formula on how to practice it, that if they did that for 4 days, that they would begin to strengthen their immune system by 50%. And now let me tell you why. Because in the center is your heart, but what most people don't know, there's another gland in there called the thymus gland. Thyme leaf, it's named after the thyme leaf. And the thymus gland has two functions. It has an endocrinological function. It makes growth hormone. That's our youth center. And it makes strong immune chemicals, and it has an immunological function. So when you're living by stress and your heart is racing and you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time because you can't run, you can't fight, you can't hide, and you got the gas and the clutch going, energy is going to leave the heart and it's going to the adrenal center, and you're going to cause contraction in the arteries in your heart, and this center will shut down from blood flow. And so there's no energy in the heart. So you teach a person then how to begin to open the center and to start feeling elevated emotions through their heart. And you teach them how to switch or convert from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, all of a sudden now, this thymus gland, which normally shrinks with age, starting at puberty, the fountain of youth now, all of a sudden begins to get new blood flow. And there's new hormones that are signaled, like oxytocin and vasopressin, and all these different chemicals called nitric oxide and endothelial-derived relaxing factor, and the arteries in the heart begin to swell with energy and blood flow. And this center switches on, and now it says, man, this feels good. And this is a time for us to really get back into balance and really let's strengthen our inner world now. And now all of a sudden, this thymus gland begins to make thymosin, which is an important agent that begins to make T cells. And T cells have little receptors on them called T cell receptors. And when those T cell receptors are robust and strong, those cells make proteins, and they make what's called antibodies or immunoglobulins. And these little Y-shaped proteins block the receptors coming from the virus that are trying to attack the white blood cells. They have a shield, and now they're immune to the virus and its attack with its receptor, and it can literally begin to inject it with these immunoglobulins, primarily immunoglobulin A, and that begins to cause the virus to not survive. And then that white blood cell will pass another white blood cell and pass on the memory to it, so it already knows what's coming. So now all of a sudden you're making these immunoglobulins, and now your inner world now can combat anything that's a foreign agent, and even cancer cells.
This is a question that I think everyone wants to know the answer to, especially during this time of feeling like there's a lack, feeling like there's a loss, feeling like there's uncertainty around money, around opportunities. Opportunities are dwindling for some people that they're thinking, you know, all these uncertain times. How do we change from having a scarcity mindset into an abundance mindset, especially if the evidence is not showing that we have abundance right now for some people?
Sure. Well, look, this is a tough question to answer, but I'll tell you that for me, I'm going to see this as a great opportunity, brilliantly disguised as an impossible situation, that I'm not going to meet this challenge from the same level of consciousness. We have to go to a greater level of awareness, a greater level of consciousness, and create and invent and figure out new ways to connect and figure out new ways to influence the Earth's field and create new ways to change outcomes in reality. And it's not about one person doing it. It's a new consciousness that must emerge, that isn't going to live in fear. Because what we fear, we give power to, we give our attention to. That we don't live as victims to our circumstances, that we create different circumstances. That if you face this present challenge as an opportunity for a greater consciousness to emerge, a collective consciousness that sees behind the illusion of separation, that could connect in a field of information and create one mind, create one heart, and emerge like those birds that all fly in one pattern, and fish in one school. You get the appearance that it's a bigger organism because there's no leader in that flock. There's no leader in that school. Everybody's leading. Everybody is demonstrating it. And that's, we have to step up beyond it. And information is causing us to see that maybe governments aren't going to take care of us. Maybe churches are not going to take care of us, or synagogues, or maybe, medicine is not going to take care of us. And maybe all of those things that we've relied on to change our inner state is not going to really, we're not going to really take care of us. At a certain point, we got to take care of us, right?
Dang.
And
Preach it, Dr. Joe. Preach it.
No, we got to face this. And there's no other alternative.
Yeah.
There isn't another alternative except waiting instead of creating. So maybe it's a time in history that you and I negotiated to be here on some other space and time, and that we're here for an awakening. Let's see what happens if we play that out. And you can't be afraid, and you can't be angry, and you can't be hostile, and you can't be resentful. And that's this consciousness that creates viruses, that creates disease. It's going to be a different frequency. We've got to see it from a different level of mind.
I want everyone listening for the next 7 days to try something. And if you could give 1 to 3 different things that we could think differently or eliminate when a thought comes to us or we react in a certain way, if there's something you think that if we eliminated 1, 2, or 3 things, and we did this every day for 7 days, we would start to see incredible feelings of differently, would feel healthier, more lively, more loved. What would be those few things?
Okay, well, most people, number one, they get up in the morning and the first thing they do is they think about the problems in their life. And those problems are memories from the past. So the moment they think about the problems, they're thinking in the past, right? Every one of those problems has an emotion attached to them. So they start feeling unhappy or unworthy or whatever. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. So most people's entire state of being is in the past when they start today. So if in the familiar past, they're going to live in a predictable future, right? So they get up and they check their cell phone, they check their text, their WhatsApp, their Facebook, they post something on Facebook, they tweet, they Twitter, they check the news, then they go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, take a shower, get dressed, check more emails, drive to work the same way, do the same thing. So they're in a program. They've actually lost their free will to the program.
Wow.
So if you start your day, and you start your day with this simple question, what is the greatest ideal of myself that I can be today? You ask yourself that question. And now listen, your body's going to go like, well, we got to get a cup of coffee, and you got to. I'm tired. And you got to go, body. You're not the mind. I'm the mind right now. You're going to sit here. I'm going to feed you. You're going to get your coffee. You're going to do all those things. But right now, this is my time. You're going to obey me, right? So now the body's no longer the mind. You're the mind. And so when it wants to get up and you become aware of it and return back to the present moment, every time you do, that's a victory. Wow. And you're changing some aspect of yourself. So then ask yourself, I do this all the time, write down 4 thoughts that you're going to stay conscious of the whole day. I can't, it's too hard. You'd be surprised the moment you become conscious of what those thoughts are, how unconscious you've been to them all day, for weeks on end. Write down what you speak, how you speak, 4 things you want to change, how you act. How do you act? Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you make excuses? Do you feel sorry for yourself? That's a victim consciousness. What emotions do you live by? Is it possible that you're so used to living by guilt you don't even know it's guilt, it just feels like you? Do you allow your energy to drop? Become conscious of those states of mind and body and review them and say, this is the old self. Then say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And start firing and wiring and start feeling it. What behaviors will I demonstrate today? What choices will I make? One day, one lifetime. And just like you did, rehearse them.
Rehearse the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
Begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain. And if you keep installing it, the hardware is going to become a software program, and you're going to start thinking and acting that way. And then here's the tough part. Can you teach your body emotionally what your future is going to feel like before it's made manifest? And don't get up until you feel that way. Now, practice that for a few days, and then see if you can stay in that state and watch all of a sudden all those weird doors start opening for you.
Synchronicities.
Whatever they are. Number 2, take a time at the end of your day, before you lay down, and give thanks for your life and feel gratitude. And really teach your body what it feels like. The emotional signature of gratitude. When gratitude means you're getting something. If I give you something that's of value, you would say thank you because you would feel it, right? So when you're receiving, you're giving thanks. So gratitude is the ultimate state of receiving. So then people only accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to their emotional state. Right. So if you're in a state of gratitude, every thought's going to make it right down into your body. If you're saying, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, and your body's programmed in negativity, it's saying, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not, that thought's going to stop right here. So as you elevate your state, there are about 1,200 different chemical reactions that go on in the body that begin to restore and repair the body in a state of gratitude. And so we've done the research to prove that. 10 minutes, and just feel it with all of your heart. That's it.
Wow.
Third thing, and very important, take time, whenever it is, sit down, close your eyes, and begin to just open your awareness to the space around you and just sense it and pay attention to it and become more aware of it. The act of opening your awareness begins to reduce the stress hormones and creates more coherent brainwave states. And I'm doing it right now. And it's just a practice.
Yeah.
It's just a practice. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
If you want to learn more about how to master your mind, check out this next video right here.
We figured out this formula of sustainable motivation in this book. But the second question is, go back to, why must I use this? Because if you don't have the why, you won't do the what. And finally, when will I use this?